our days here. Sometimes we get to thinking, well, we do have a tendency to just take it for granted. We'll live on and on and on until you get up to the more mature age and you start thinking about, well, I'm not going to live forever. And so mortality becomes something that you think about a little more often. And if you really think about it, you're going to start thinking about your relationship with God a little more. How we come into this world is one thing, and then how we leave it is something else. Some people leave this world in a violent manner. Some people just pass away in their sleep. Some people leave riches to others. Some leave nothing behind. But our walk here, whatever time it is, and what we're doing, is preparing us for the time that we're no longer here. We don't understand, Pastor, that we're already walking in eternity. All this is a temporary place which will determine which way we go. The advertisement on TV, if you died tonight, would you go to heaven or not? Well, that little advertisement's kind of misleading because it's not telling you that you are going somewhere else. It's not telling you that you don't have a choice anymore. Because once you step over that threshold, the decision has been made. There are some who believe that it can be changed afterwards, but my Bible doesn't teach me that. And so we're here today to carry on our journey toward that point that we're no longer here. I know a lot of people don't like to think about not being here, but one day we all pass away. This old body returns back to the dust from which it came, and the spirit goes on to its destination ultimately. Today we're going to talk about the mind of Christ. Oh, what a subject. It's kind of a dangerous subject. Who has the mind of Christ? I want to claim it. Why? That's mighty big of you to claim the mind of Christ. Well, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 2 that we have, who is we? The ones who know of the Lord, the ones who have received forgiveness, the ones who have received salvation. We have the mind of Christ, he said. We're going to look over in Philippians in just a few minutes to one of my most favorite verses, and most everybody that knows me knows that I love that verse, or those verses that talk about the mind of Christ. In the study this week of coming up to the mind of Christ, I've come to one great conclusion of it, that by pursuing the mind of Christ, you will capture the heart of God. Who would not want that? To have the mind of Christ, you will have the heart of God. For Jesus said many times over, I'm not here to do what I want to do. And as a matter of fact, he said, Father, if it's possible, would you let this stuff just pass me by? It's hard. He had even asked the disciples, can you drink of the cup that I have to drink from? He said, surely you will. And they did. 1 Corinthians 2:16 says, for who hath known the mind of the Lord? Isaiah 40 says something very similar. But nobody is able to stand in the counsel of the Lord. But we have, as Paul writes, we have the mind of Christ. What do we do with it? How do we use it? How do we build upon it? Well, I really don't have the mind of Christ. You know, that's for him. That's for other things. I am not that good. I can't be held to that kind of a standard. The mind of Christ, I found it in my studies, that goes back to one thing. He said, I didn't come of my own will. I come to please the Father. Do you know how to please the Father? If you don't, I challenge you today to start looking. Start asking that question in your prayer life. How do I please you, Father? How can I come closer to you? How can I get to where I can emulate Jesus Christ? The mind of Christ. Do you understand what the word Christ means? That is the anointed one. Christ is the Greek word for Messiah. Do you have the mind of Messiah? Our Savior. Wait a minute, that's getting pretty deep. I can't go there. I am not the Savior of the world. You're supposed to be the ambassador. You're supposed to be carrying the good news. You're supposed to be telling everybody along the way, Jesus Christ can change your life. Do you? Or do we? You know, having the mind of Christ is not as hard as it seems, or as hard as we might make it out to be. It's really, there's a couple of words in the Bible, in the Strong's number 3563, nous, which is the Greek word for mind, and it is the mind, it is the understanding, it is the reasoning of a person. It's not just the brain that's in the head, but it encompasses several characteristics of the individual. And in the Hebrew is 3820 lab, and that's inner man, the mind, the will, the heart. What is your passion in Christianity? Shouldn't it be Christ? If you are the Christ follower, and if we're following Christ, if Christ lives in us, why do we not have the mind of Christ? Well, I can't perform those miracles. I can't do all of that stuff. Pastor was talking earlier about Peter, and I got a little tickled because that was one of my statements about where he asked Peter, who do you say that I am? That's a question we need to be asking ourselves individually in our prayer life. Who is Christ to me? I know who Christ is to me. It wasn't very long ago, being sick, running fever, and one of the worst nights that I had, I was so cold. I'd never been that cold before. And I work in freezers. I worked in a lot of cold freezers. But I'd never been that cold. And nothing changed. I did some things there at the house. Got up, went to bed, piled the covers up on me and stuff like that. But nothing changed until I heard the words, leave him, he is mine. It was Christ speaking. When that happened, I started healing. So who is Christ? He is my healer. But more importantly, He is my Lord, my Savior. He is the one who paid the price that I can claim anything in this world. He is the one that gave Himself a ransom for me so that I could be before the Father. And who else would do that? And as they talked about Peter asking, or Jesus asking Peter the question, who do you say I am? Just 5 verses later in that same chapter, Jesus told him, get behind me, Satan, for you're a stumbling block to me. And the reason that He said you're a stumbling block to me, He said, because your mind is not on things of God. Your mind is on the worldly stuff, things of men. Get behind me, Satan. And also notice that in that passage, He never, ever told Peter, get away from me and don't ever come back. He does not push us away when we make a mistake. When we stumble and fall, He is there to pick us up. He is there to walk with us to make sure that we're okay. He has paid too high of a price to just discard us in the moment of our fallibility. He knows that we are weak. What did He tell them? It was Peter, James, and John He took with Him that night. Come pray with me. Can you not watch with me just 1 hour? And then He go ahead and sleep. I understand. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He does not discard us. There's not a time that I can find in the Bible that He has taken any of the disciples, even Judas. He did not discard him. But Judas made his decisions that led him to the not so famous fame that he has. And the mind of Christ that's certainly not something that we would want to take lightly, or that we should take lightly, or just discard. But it is something Paul says we've got it. Now, why don't we use it? And so in 2 Philippians, we're going to go there. And it says that if there be therefore any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any bowels and mercies, fulfill you my joy, that you be like-minded. To be like-minded of Christ. He says, be ye like-minded, having the same love as Christ. I don't know if I want to go there, Lord. Those people really don't like me. That neighbor is kind of harsh to me, and I can't really get to know them. You know, so I'll just pray for them from a distance, and let that be that. And sometimes maybe we do have to pray from a distance. And I know there's a woman down in the Atlanta area. I've seen her twice in my life that I know of. Both times were not good times for her. One time she was scooted up against the wall as close as she could be in a rainstorm, trying to stay warm, get some sleep. Asked the people in the store about her. Oh, she's a drug addict. But she's there sometimes. She's there today, be gone tomorrow, be back later. And then I saw her again the other day. was stretched out as we're going down the road, stretched out on this little rise there, some bushes around and stuff, taking in the sun as much as she could, sleeping in the sunlight, trying to stay warm. My prayers have gone up many times for that woman, whoever she is. And she's not alone, I know that. But God has put her in my path. She is one that I pray for. I don't need to know her name. I don't even need to know her background. God knows what her future is. And He can make it to be whatever He desires. Part of that desire is for me to pray. Has God ever put somebody like that in your way? Jesus, I'm reminded of, went on ahead of the disciples one time and said, I've got to go to this well over here in Samaria. He said, I must go there. I got to get there. Of course, the disciples never understood why. But there was a one woman that needed to hear the words that Jesus had to tell her. You eat of this bread or drink of this water, you'll never thirst again. And that by the end of the conversation, she was going to town and telling everybody. What a wonderful outcome. How many times will we just shrug it off and just let life roll on? So if there's any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any bowels of mercy, fulfill you my joy that you be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. One mind. That mind should be the mind of Christ. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind. There we go. Lowliness of mind. I like to be high-minded. I like to esteem things. I like to think of things better than what they are. Lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. I got a good truck. Brett's got a great truck. I like that truck, Brett. We look on things of others. We try to outdo the others sometimes. There's no reason to outdo anyone. There's no reason to have better. There's no reason to have greater. It's all the same. If it's given of the Lord, it belongs to the Lord anyway. We'll go on to read, let this mind be in you. And I love that, because we're fixing to talk about the Son of God. Paul says, let this mind be in you. He already said, we have the mind of Christ. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, the mind of Christ. Do you give Christ the credit for the things that you're thinking of, the things that you want to do in your prayer life, and so forth? Because He is the example. You know, He told Peter when He was going to wash his feet. Of course, Peter rejected the Lord from washing his feet until He told him, well, you have no part with me. He said, well, then not only my feet, but my head, my hands, just wash me all over, because I want all of you I can get. You know? And that's the way we should be. We should realize that we need Him more than what we think we do. That He should be the very breath that we are breathing. He should be our daily bread, as we sing about. He should be our all in all. And it says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God. Can you imagine the status Jesus Christ held in heaven? Do you imagine that maybe the angels were subject unto him? He said on the cross that I can pray for my Father and he'll send me more than 12 legion of angels to fight for me. The devil, at the beginning of Christ's ministry, the devil said, cast yourself down here, said the angels will bear you up. He had a real good position, the Son of God. Do you think not the angels were going to support him in whatever he wanted to do, however he chose them to react? Certainly he had a great home. And in this verse, when I read that, I'm reminded that Jesus told a parable. I believe it's in Matthew. I don't remember right off. He said there was a man who had 2 sons. He said the father come to him, to the first one, and says, I need you to go work in my field today. The first one said, not me, Dad. I got other things. Other things I need to go do. But he repented and went. In the meantime, he come to the second one and said, I need you to go work in my field today. Yeah, I'll go do that. But he never showed up. How often can we find ourselves in that one of those situations where we're being asked and we're willing to say yes, but maybe we don't follow through? Or we say, no, I'm not going. But maybe we'll repent and say, I'm sorry, Father. I'm on my way. As soon as I can get there, I will do whatever you ask. But he thought it not robbery to be equal with God. I'm the Son of God. I can create worlds. I can command legions of angels to do my bidding. And angels, quite powerful beings, created of the Lord. And we read back in the Old Testament, I believe it was 180 some odd thousand that one angel slew one night in the battle. Quite powerful, quite capable. But he said, no, I'm coming down from here, from this lofty height that I set at, and I'm going to be a servant. Back in the foot washing deal, that's what Jesus told Peter. He said, I have given you an example. If I, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, he said, this is what you should be doing with others. That is the mind of Christ. Here is the mind of Christ. Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself no reputation. I'm not that lofty person that I could be. Said, but he made himself of no reputation and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. Took on the form of a servant. He found himself just like us in this world, going from day to day, not having legions of angels to go before him, preparing the way. But he said, he even told one person, I've got no place to even lay my head. We struggle and we fight for our homes and the right to this place or that place. He said, that's not my struggle. I can lay my head upon the rock. It will be my pillow if necessary. But things of this world sometimes become too important in our lives that we forget what is really important. What is really important is not about us. It is about someone else. It is about what I will be willing to give up, give away, to enable somebody else to recognize Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. We can preach them messages for sure. We can give money to different agencies to go out and preach and spread the gospel around the world. But all in all, I think we are called to a personal duty to the gospel. It said, took upon him the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men, and being found in fashion as a man, he did what? Humbled himself and became obedient. Pastor preaches many times about humbling ourselves, him being humbled, learning to be humbled. We are nothing. We are nothing in reality other than God's creation. He has created us for His good pleasure, but His good pleasure also brings about purpose. We are created in His likeness, and I like that next part. It says, in His image. We are in the likeness and the image of God. He dwells in here if we are born again. Why do we not have the mind of Christ continually? We can have it on Sunday. We'll go to church. Here's the message. Everything's good. What about Wednesday evening when it's late? When there's a drug addict in a rainstorm that needs a place that's warm and out of the weather? Or what about any other time that somebody in need might cross your path? You know, it's one thing to say, well, I'll pray for you and go on about your business, get home. Well, I need to pray for this person that I met at the gas station. You know, maybe that's good. But if you had what was necessary at the gas station to take care of their need, what good is coming home and praying for them? You have the opportunity then. It's not for later on. To have the mind of Christ is to be able to discern the need, what you're capable of doing, and what you can give somebody. Peter and John, I believe it was, says, silver and gold have I none. I don't have money. You lowly beggar sitting there forever alongside the road. I don't have any money, but what I got, what I do have, I want to share with you. And if you'll receive it, you'll get up from there and walk. And lo and behold, he did. Silver and gold have I none, but what I have I give to you. In the name of Jesus Christ, rise up. Rise up and walk. In the name of Jesus Christ, confronting the downtrodden doesn't necessarily mean you've got to give everything you've got to somebody that you don't know. But it means emptying out your heart for them because you have the mind of Christ. Surely as Jesus went about getting to the well to speak to the lady, a lot of times we spend as much energy trying to get away from the well so we don't have to speak to anybody. In all of that we read in verses 5 through 8 there, humility. You know, Jesus, despite being who he was, the Son of God, the one who is in control of our destiny after we leave this life, was humbled. He learned humility. He didn't make his status a point of his ministry. Well, I'm the Son of God. Perhaps many of the Pharisees, if he'd have done so, might have accepted his role in life. But that's not the plan that was laid out in the beginning. Jesus Christ was to be slain on the hill of Golgotha before Adam was ever raised up out of the dust. From the foundations of the world, it was set. It was put in motion. And much of the time we go through life self-centered. What I have to do. We don't want to get out of our routine. We don't want to be distracted by the need of someone else. I've got so much stuff going on. I've got children I got to get home to. I've got much work around the house that I've got to do. I promised so-and-so that I would be over there today. And so I've got to do all this. And here's one that I really don't know what to do other than talk with them, give them the words of Jesus that I know, and pass a little time with them. You know that sometimes that's probably more important than all the gold you could give them, which at the time they may not agree with you. But when people are having bad thoughts, unwholesome thoughts, losing my hope thoughts, because that's where this world is at right now. Where is my hope? How do I survive today? So people, I'm not even thinking about tomorrow. Well, many of us in better shape are. I'm not thinking about tomorrow. I don't even know where I'm going to eat today. We live in this land of plenty, and there's plenty of need. While we live in this land that has so much of an abundance, we have learned to be greedy and selfish. You know, what's mine is mine. You'll have to get your own. You know, but Christ, the mind of Christ is not that way. Will you open up your cupboards for the person who has nothing to eat? Will you take the covers off of your bed, give them to someone who has not even a house to sleep in? The mind of Christ is not self. The mind of Christ is breaking it all down for the sake of the next person, the sake of someone else. You know, we can't, well, first of all, we can't save anyone. Only Christ can. But we can't touch every person out there, but we can touch the ones that God puts in our way. We can make it so that they can see Christ. Pastor was talking last week about seeing the different ones and calls them by name because that's how he knows them. Mariana's sitting there, and my wife is sitting here. How many times do we look around and we see Christ sitting over there, see Christ back here. See Christ over here. We assume that we're all Christian, but we're to fade away. Do the people out there in the world, do they see Carl when I come forth to give them a helping hand? Or do they see Christ? I want them to see Christ. Carl's got no good thing for him. Carl's greedy and selfish and self-centered. And I want to have the mind of Christ. For in the help that they need, I cannot do anything for them. Because ultimately, they need Jesus. And He is the only salvation that we have. There is no works that can get you into heaven. There are no works that can keep you out of hell. It is your love of Christ, here and now, that does all of that. You know, Jesus identified as a servant. He willingly took upon that role. Most of us go screaming and kicking. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. No, that's too much. I can't do that. I'm not qualified. But we can, through the grace of God, through the abilities that He is going to endow us with, through all of those wonderful gifts, through the Holy Spirit that He said is there, is yours, if you'll just pick them up, start using them. Most of us want to pick up those gifts and go hide them under the bed. I'll keep those, because those are good. Any good thing about us is to be given away. It's not to be kept. Only by giving away can we become what Pastor says we can't be, the better you, because we become more Christ-like. And as we become more Christ-like, we gather up the mind of Christ, we become the people who are thinking more about others than about ourselves. How about late on a Friday, when you maybe want to go to the ball game, but a neighbor's got a flat tire on the car and they can't get it fixed. They need somebody to take them to get some air in it or whatever. I got time. I got plenty of time. It doesn't matter. Even if I'm on my way to church, I got time to do the Lord's work. Do I have to be here to serve the Lord? No, it's going to be out there that you're going to serve Him the most. It's going to be in your day-to-day walk that He is looking for people who will have that mind of Christ to be that servant to those who need to be served. You know, we all want the easy. We all want the recognition. We all want the wonderful things that God has promised. In their hours, I mean, all of the promises in the Bible belong to us. Whichever one sticks out the most to you, it belongs to you. Not going to be taken away. You don't have to give it up. But maybe it also belongs to that person that you need to help. Maybe it also belongs to other people round about that person that you're fixing to help. You don't know. God has a plan, and it works out every time that you'll let Him have His way. Jesus found that He was made in the likeness of men. And He come here and He walked this earth for 33 years. He found out what it was like to probably go a little bit hungry from time to time. I don't know. Know that He was born at a time when we didn't have cultures like we have right now. The houses didn't have central heat and air in them. They didn't have running water in them, most of them. And didn't have automobiles to get around, turn the air conditioner on, zip on down the road. A lot of times there weren't very good roads if you had a road. But he walked this earth, and walk it he did, just as me and you, up and down the hills, through the valleys. The Bible tells me that he couldn't do much work in his hometown. He had problems even with his own family. Situations that he just couldn't overcome at the time. Even though we know that James changed his mind later on. And he wrote a book or wrote letters about his brother, about how to live and things that we should know about him. But having the mind of Christ, you will not find yourself in a situation that he is not familiar with. He has been in situations with people, places, and things that even we know of. How many of us are ready to go before the tribunal and tell them that they are wrong? You know, we see in this day and age with stuff that's going on with people, even in our political system, and we're saying, man, I hope that never happens to me. But what if it does? There's been people in other countries where communism has taken over and their liberties are revoked. They can't preach the Word of God. They can't pray. They can't sing. They can't do this or that because it's being wiped out and done away with. Not legal anymore. And you do it and they throw you into prison. Well, usually that's not good enough. They want you to renounce the Christianity. They want you to renounce the Lord. They want you to deny all of that. And for if you do, they'll use it as propaganda against you. What happens if that happens here? You know, as time goes by, I see where laws are changing, where attitudes are changing, that it could. I'm not saying that it will, but it could. Are you steadfast in what you believe? Do you have the mind of the Lord to stand there while somebody pulls your beard out and tell them, I love you? How about when they spit on you for the name of the Lord? Is that mind in you to say, God bless you? That was the mind that Christ had. That is the mind that Christ has today. As he went about his ministry, he left the throne of glory to come down to inglorious. Why? Because there was only one way that you could ever make it to heaven. And that is through his sacrifice, through you accepting his sacrifice. You know, he went on to say, no man cometh to me, no man cometh to the Father but through me. But you don't come to me just right off just because you want to. The Father is drawing you through all that he's done, through all that he's planned throughout the years. The Father has called you, he's selected you, he's wooing you to come and be, because he wishes that nobody would perish. And what he's talking of is that after this life is over and we go to be with our Maker, some will not make it. And you can read in the Gospels where Jesus talks about putting the goats and the sheep in separate groups. Some, he says, come in, you blessed of my Father. The others, he says, I never knew you. The mind of Christ puts us in the right category. The mind of Christ keeps us in line with the Father's will. And through the studies that I went through, the will of the Father is this, that Jesus should lose none that was given to him. The will of the Father is that you should not perish. The will of the Father is that that woman that I've seen out there a couple of times should not perish. I pray for her salvation. I pray that she finds a way out of whatever it is that has control of her. I pray that her life be changed through Jesus Christ. As I listen to praise and worship early in the mornings, there's another song by Charity Gale, the woman that sings I Speak Jesus. And the title of it is, Because of Jesus, I Am Changed. Who else will change you? Who else can change you? He asked the question, can the leper change the spots? The answer is no. But what happened to the lepers that Jesus changed? They become clean. He said, go show the priest so that you can join back into the local group. Then out of all of it, how many returned to give thanks? One. Where's the other 9? Sometimes we have to ask ourselves, am I part of that 9 or am I that 1? And Jesus was selfless. His mindset was, he humbled himself. He left the place of comfort. He left the place of home. He left his place where he was in charge. And we can see similarities in the talking about the prodigal son. Give me what's mine, Dad, and I'm going on. And winds up squandering it all. But Jesus willingly took on the role of the servant. That's his mindset. He told Peter, as I have done to you, as I have given you that example, this is what you should be doing for others. Now, we don't do foot washings anymore. We don't do a lot of things that's in the Bible anymore. By choice. That's a lot of times we think, well, that's above us because we know it's symbolism, right? Well, we don't want to do symbolism. It's just, we know what the real part about foot washing or having communion or anything else is really all about, so we don't have to partake of that. God, back in the days of the Israelites wandering through the desert, was telling them, you take my words and you put them on these little tags right here in front of your eyes where you can see them. You write them on your doorpost where you will have to look at them every time you go in your house. All of us have got Bibles at home that are collecting dust. We're not going to open up the Bible and sit there and read it. And the family Bible might be that thick, but we don't know what's inside of it. And so we don't do so much. We let things go by the wayside because we think we've got it. Because we think we know. And all the time, the mind of Christ is not really in us. We think it is, but we bypass the need out there in the world time and time again. And it talks about obedience. That Jesus became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. How many of us are that obedient? Are you ready to give it all for the sake of someone else? Oh, if it's my family, yes. Oh, if it's for somebody at the church, I'll do that. Well, I'm 71 years old. Sure, I've already lived a good life, a good long life, so take me. No. Think about what God did. He gave His only begotten Son for you, for all who would believe. Many will not believe, even though He was given for them also. The mind of Christ is characterized by humility, love, wisdom, forgiveness. So that's a characteristic right there we have a hard time with. Forgiving someone who has wronged us is a hard thing to do. It should be one of the easiest things to do. The mind of Christ will not hold it against them. We can lay this stuff down. We don't have to carry it with us. It's all right. Well, Jesus told us that it's not about you. They do these things to you. It's about me that they're doing it. You don't have to bear that burden. Jesus has already made a way for us to leave it at the foot of the cross. He takes it from there. If vengeance needs to be paid, He says, I will pay the vengeance. That's my job. Judging what all goes on is what I'm supposed to do. And so for humility, love, wisdom, forgiveness, servant leadership, and unwavering obedience. As we seek to follow Him, may we cultivate these characteristics in our lives. Do we really want to be a servant? No, I want to be the man sitting on the throne. That's where most of us want to be. We can all look to heaven and, oh, what a glorious time. We'll be around the throne. We'll cast our crowns like that's really what we're after. I hope not. I hope not. That is just a little bit of the picture. The true fellowship with Christ, Jesus the Christ, the anointed of the Most High God, is to be of like mind, be of the same fellowship, not picking one over the other. There is none greater than the least of these. What was he said about John the Baptist? Born of women, none greater. In the kingdom of heaven, he's kind of on the back row. James and John wanted to sit on the right and left. He said, no, it's not for me to decide. That's the Father's position. I can't give you that. And as Pastor was talking earlier, Matthew 11:29, when Jesus said, take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, he said. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. And Peter in 1 Peter 5:3 wrote, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. Sometimes we don't want to be the example. We want to be the one pointing out the flaws, the things that need correction. 1 John 2:6 says, whoever claims to abide in him must walk as Jesus walked. Can you walk in humbleness with a servant's heart? With the attitude that everybody else is better than you? With the attitude that everybody else needs more than you? And that you can supply those needs and you will? Most of us want to be the recipient of the good works of other people. John 5 verse 30 says, I can of my own self do nothing. As I hear, I judge. And my judgment is just, because I seek not my own will, but the will of the Father which has sent me. Jesus came to please the Father. Jesus, a lot of us say, well, Jesus come to save me. Jesus coming saved you. The will of the Father is what saved you. For not wanting any to perish is what has allowed us salvation. John 8:29 says, and he that sent me is with me. The Father hath not left me alone, for I do always those things that please him. And in Proverbs 3:5 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. And that word that's translated heart there can be the same thing as mind. And lean not unto your own understanding. Trust the Lord with all that you have, with all of your thinking, with all of your passion. Trust God. Trust Jesus. Romans 15:5 says, now the God of patience and consolation grant you to be like-minded, one toward another, according to Christ Jesus. To have the mind of Christ, to have the mind of the anointed, to have God blessing the things that you do. Romans 12:1 says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice. Wait a minute. I didn't sign up for that. Have the mind of Christ. The mind of Christ. Present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Reasonable service through the mind of Christ. Sometimes I don't know if I'm cut out for this. We are all capable. He is not asking us to do something that we cannot do. But it becomes a matter of the will. How much do you want Christ? How much do you want God the Father? And he goes on to write, it says, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. We all know these things. This is nothing new. By the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Oh, there's perfection. I'm not there yet. Pursuing the mind of Christ will make you perfect. You have been perfected through salvation. Don't think that you haven't. When you're accepted of Christ, when you're accepted of God the Father, you are perfect. You've got everything you need. While we have an idea of perfect being one thing, perfect from the Bible means you are made whole. You're complete. There's nothing else needed. That's perfection. John 14:15 says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. That's Jesus speaking. And again in verse 21 he says, whoever has my commandments and keeps them is the one who loves me. Do you have his commandments? Do you love him? The one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and reveal myself to him. So stand with Jesus. Get the mind of Jesus, the mindset of Jesus. Take upon you all that he has for you. Don't be afraid to be like Jesus. You are supposed to be. You're supposed to be loving and kind and serving and giving and taking on the lowly task that others don't. And you get down to the different things that sometimes we fail, sometimes we falter, we make mistakes. Jesus never, ever pushes anyone out. There is always room for forgiveness. And this needs to be in our mindset too, the mindset of Christ, that as we go through life, we have to have room for forgiveness for everybody that comes across our path. Forgiveness for everyone who might have hurt us, and forgiveness for those who have just fallen down in life. They didn't take the same path. It's okay. As long as you have breath, you have an opportunity to repent. And I'm here to tell you the good news. I'm here to tell you that there is water that you can drink of and you'll never thirst anymore. I'm here to tell you that Jesus, my Jesus, that lives in here, lives up here, wants you to have the same opportunities. So we give ourselves away to Christ. We melt into his image. His image. Micah Tyler's song about just fading away. I love it when you talk about just getting rid of yourself. Don't want them to see anything. I don't want people to see Carl. I want people to see Jesus. So know that, as I said before, there are organizations that would go to different places overseas to minister and stuff. And they would tell the people with them, don't tell anybody that you're a Christian, because that has become a bad name in some areas. So tell them you're a follower of Christ. So they wear the badge of Christian in some places is not so good, because we have gone out of our way to trash it. Some have exploited it for their benefit. Others try to get rid of it altogether. There's still movements in our country to get rid of the gospel, to close down the churches, stuff like that. And it becomes a little louder as time goes by. But there again, they can't do any more than what the Lord above allows them to do. Having the mind of Christ is suitable for all of us. We used to have this little saying, WWJD, what would Jesus do? We should all know what Jesus would do. We know that he's going to offer love and direction and forgiveness, and that he's going to make everything okay. We know what Jesus would do, and we know what the Father wants. We should be about the Father's business while it is day. Night time comes when no man can work. and the second coming will be here soon. So I'm going to close up, ask Pastor AC to come and close out the service. So that if you have needs, a prayer or whatever, he'll be able to direct you and take care of it. The mind of Christ is a valuable asset in our lives. We should not take it lightly. Paul said we've got it. We need to use it. Pastor?